want to thank Next Level Marketing for being our opening sponsor on the podcast. If you have social media that you use for marketing, you need to check out Next Level Marketing and follow them on Facebook. You can also reach them at Gary Bontrager Consulting on our website, www.garybontrager.com. They will do a free audit for you and check out what your social media, how it's performing, what loopholes there are, and how you can tighten it up and be more effective with your marketing. They will help put strategies together to use organic growth to maximize the dollars that you do spend. We appreciate them being an associate sponsor with us on this Mindset Growth podcast and enjoy what they do for us. This is a company that we work with and we endorse, and we don't take that lightly. Good morning. Gary here with Mindset Growth Podcast. I have Heather, my co-host, with me today.
Good morning.
We are very excited, Heather, for this next guest. It's somebody we've
not as excited as I am, Gary.
See, he's already fired up and interrupting. So we know we're going to have a great session. One thing I think about when I think of Todd Saylor, our guest, is energy. There's nobody that I know that gives off such a positive energy and yet is so genuine at the same time. Yeah. So his motive and goals that as I pick up, and we're going to get into, are how he serves others and the importance he puts on giving others all of himself. And if he's coaching, they're getting all of it. If he's writing a book, he just pours his heart right. It's like you can feel in his book. He's just living it right there. So,
well, like he'll say, he's all in.
I'm all in.
And fashionable at the same time.
So to you listeners, welcome Todd Saylor. How are you today?
All right. Oh, thank you for that entry. Wow, that intro is awesome. I hope I can live up to that intro.
I'm not concerned about that at all. To start, though, let's tell us a little bit about yourself and give our listeners a little history and a background, maybe your childhood and kind of what transitioned from there to set you on the path where you're at now.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think it should be an easy question, but generally a long question. I think the story of Wired Differently does start with me being a child, and I just did a keynote. This last weekend, and I introduced the story of being wired differently as it came from my father. And my father was an amazing man. And it's just this idea, right? This I can't help but smile at you, Heather, but it's just this idea. Come on, Gary. It's just this idea that my father impressed on me as a little child that he could will anything to happen. Mm-hmm. And without getting emotional this early in the story, my entire life, I watched this man walk on this earth as a giant and just will the littlest thing to happen, from something in the backyard to the largest, most epic thing in my life, to win a national win streak record in Hudson, Michigan, and win 72 games in a row, no loss or no tie. And so, man, he was wired differently. And the idea of him being wired differently was the fact that he didn't know he was wired differently. It took me till I was age of 50 to figure out what's going on. I didn't follow Tony Robbins. I didn't follow Zig Ziglar. I didn't follow any of these epic people in this inspirational, motivational world. But I knew there was something different about me. And I knew that for some reason, I got everything I wanted in life. I know that sounds borderline arrogant, but it's just true. But the converse of that, Gary and Heather, is that I got almost everything that I wanted in life that I didn't want. Right? And so when I'm thinking about this, 30s and my 40s and my 50s, and we're up to 14 organizations right now. It's just amazing what God has done in my life for me, even in my marriage and my family, and certainly the business world. But it's this idea. I love listening to you guys because mindset, the four things I want to talk to you about in Wired Differently, if we go this long, is that it's a mindset, it's a mission, it's a movement, and it's a ministry. And excellent. I want the story of Wired Differently to be told. I want you to understand, Gary and Heather, that your will be done. God created our mind for us to seek everything and get everything that we drop in our subconscious.
So let me ask you a quick question, because I want to break this down just a little bit, because I love where you're going with it. But you didn't listen to these great, motivational people. But what I'm hearing you say is your father's the one who set you on that path. He gave you an example and just motivated you and was really a life coach to you. Is that a correct statement?
I mean, he was a mentor to me, of course, as I watched him mentor other men, right? And it wasn't a purposeful mentorship. I'm going to be honest with you guys right now. I'm going to give you a special treat. Today I will be signing a contract with 2 movie producers.
Wow.
And we're engaging in a major motion picture called The Tiger in Us.
Wow.
And by Wired Differently Production. And we're going to be moving through this entire story about the love affair of a son to a father as he mentors others through a football program, taking them through this win streak, but yet training them to go to war in Vietnam all at the same time. And I'll be speaking at the Super Bowl in the upcoming weeks in February. And, Lord willing, Tony Dungy and I are going to really get this thing moving, and some other people in our lives in the NFL and the state of Michigan. So, man, that's a really exciting thing. But yeah, he mentored me. He mentored other men. And so, my father didn't understand the power of the subconscious. He barely got D's. Matter of fact, Eastern Michigan gave him a master's degree and changed his grade from a D to an A 50 years later after he graduated from Eastern Michigan. Right? So
real quick though, he was a coach. He was your high school coach? So when this win streak was going on, Gary and Heather, I was 10 years old in a little city called Hudson, Michigan. Mm-hmm. From 1968 to 1975. Okay.
He never lost a game, right?
And he was the coach in that whole period.
He coached every one of those young men.
Okay.
But the irony of it is when I speak all over the country, I tell the story about, I thought my father was a football coach, but at one point he was doing war games at practice. And I asked him, Dad, what is going on here? I thought you were a football coach. And he came over to me and he calmly regarded me and he said, son, I'm not a football coach. These men are not going to school after football. They're not going to work in the factories after football. They're not even going to go work on the farm after football. They're going to Vietnam. Son, I'm not a football coach. I'm a builder of men. And so the ulterior motive of what he was doing was preparing these men for Vietnam. Oh, and by the way, we're setting a world win streak record, and we went undefeated for 8 seasons. And if you go undefeated this season, you'll break the world record. Bear Bryant's watching, ABC's watching, Brett Musburger's watching, People Magazine's watching, Sports Illustrated's watching. Everybody was there. We had a movie crew living with us in our house.
Wow.
I had no choice but to be influenced by his will be done. And so the third book I'm writing right now, Heather and Gary, is titled Your Will Be Done. Mm-hmm. Wired Differently was my first book. And that was What is Wired Differently? Me finding myself through this world of understanding why was my will being done without Tony Robbins.
Right.
And then Drift Again was my second book. And that was, 8 Traits of Supremely Purposeful People, which is why we're wired differently, why we're successful. But last but not least, this third book is titled Your Will Be Done. And that is how to become wired differently. Isn't it exciting? I mean, I'm literally going to tell you how to become wired differently. Now, I own Wired Differently. I bought Wired Inc., Wired Magazine, everybody else that wanted to come to fight me over it, over $50,000. I went to battle. I own Wired Differently. You and I, you're wired differently, Gary. Heather, I know you're wired differently. We own it. Nobody can take that from our movement. We're a mindset, we're a mission, we're a movement, and we're a ministry. Go ahead, Gary.
So some people just have a different outlook on life. And I can put my hand up. That was me. That's probably why just some things culturally and different, I took a different path. when you talk about Wired Differently and you speak and visit with a lot of folks and coach them, I guess my question to you is, how do you, because I have a belief about leadership that it's taught and not just a natural tendency. Some people have more natural abilities than others. Mm-hmm. What's your thought process when you say Wired Differently? What I'm figuring or what I'm trying to decipher for the listeners here is, how do they know that they've got something that sets them apart? And is it just their ability to change the way they think, how they process? What are some of those things?
Well, since I didn't start with Tony Robbins and the world, Napoleon Hill and all these greats, right? I ended up finding them after I planted my seeds or my foot in the ground of this Wired Differently mindset. But I think I love what you're doing, and I agree with everything I've ever heard you say. But I'm a precursor to some of the things you're saying.
Okay.
I literally start with the baby in the womb, right? God created us in his own image. And there are 3 phases to being wired differently. There's creation, actualization, and salvation. And I spend most of my time on the creation phase of being wired differently, and secondly, the actualization phase. And I'll go very quickly here. But the creation phase, we need to understand there is a science behind the way we think and the way we move. Do you realize that literally when you're cooking in your mama's womb, you're cranking out about 100 million neurons a minute? That's a lot of neurons.
Yeah.
And when you're born, you will have been born with 250 billion neurons in that baby brain. Now think about that. That's just staggering. That's why you're crying. Your head hurts so much, right? Now, listen to me. By the time you're 3 years old, you will have amassed 1,000 trillion neurons. Now, that's not even a number. It's called a quadrillion. And that's 15 zeros, Heather. Come on. That's a lot of neurons. Now think of the infinite cocktail that God has created in his own image in that baby brain by the time you're 3. Now, by the time you're 7, all that neural activity will have reached its peak. Mm-hmm. You'll have learned more in the first 7 years of your life than you'll learn the rest of your life.
Yep.
And God now takes that baby mind that's on an autonomic nervous system, right? And he's teaching the fingernails to grow. You don't make any decisions as a baby. You don't even know when you're going to go to the bathroom. You cry when you think you're hungry. God is just making things work in that regards. He's got you in your hands, his hand. But at 7, sometime your prefrontal cortex starts to develop, right? And all of a sudden, somewhere between 7 and let's say 20, your mind is fully developed. And once that mind is fully developed, God has created you in his own image, but he then says, with a handoff with your baby brain to you, he says, your will be done. He has created your mind for success, but your brain for survival. And he's given you all the weapons to take this subconscious and that neural plasticity in that brain that he's put together for you to be successful in this world. Now, at this point, you haven't accepted Christ into your heart. The pathway to Christ, the pathway to heaven or the kingdom now isn't that you will go automatically because God has handed your brain and your subconscious off to you. He's allowed you to be free, to give you free will. And this is the piece, the second phase called actualization, where I think you and I really need to make sure that everybody understands that God gave us a supercharged subconscious. That very subconscious that Elon Musk has, that very subconscious that Bill Gates has, that very subconscious that Jeff Bezos, or you name them, whether they have God or not, God programmed them to be super successful. And I believe that what you put in your subconscious comes true. And now we need to train our mindset for success through those neural pathways.
Heather, we talk about that. You think if you focus where your focus goes, your energy flows. Yep. You're going to see things come to fruition just because of where you organize your thoughts. I want to thank you for this so far. We got this far into the podcast, and I've only started you on the first question. And Heather was worried about not having enough questions.
Oh, no. I knew we'd be able to talk. I did not doubt that for a second.
We're kind of jumping around. One thing I want people to know, though, and I ask every guest this because somebody like you has a morning routine, I have to believe.
Yeah.
So I want to hear a little bit what that is. We always ask that question, what's your morning routine? Because if we have folks listening here and they want to change the direction of their life, it's very important how they start their morning and the things they do from the time they open their eyes till they go back to bed that night. So that's kind of where you've got to change, not mindsets, but only actions and habits and activities. So give us that little rundown.
Well, I believe that your habits are the North Star of your identity. Write that one down. That's a great one for you guys. Your habits are the North Star of your identity. So when you think about habits, you think about your morning routine. It's a great, great question. So the quick answer to that question is, I'm up between 4:30 and 5:15. I don't have an alarm. I'm not programmed to sleep later than that. I'm programmed. My body says, get up, get going. You got stuff to do. By 8:30, I have pretty much my entire day planned and done. And so now from basically 8:30 to 3:30, I'm more in a reactionary role or moving on meetings that I've scheduled from previous days or even stuff I've put together that morning. I have probably 2 people in my life that answer directly to me in the chain of command, and they are texting with me by 6 to 7 o'clock in the morning. So, and most of this is done in the confines of my bedroom. By the time 6 o'clock hits, I've already read my daily devotionals. I've already ran through my agenda for the day. I've already put out emails for any changes I need to make. Everybody in all 14 of my organizations have already been notified of anything that's bothering me or anything that we need to follow up on. But one of the things I want to people to hear is that at roughly 6:15 to 6:30 in the morning, I never miss making my wife her cup of coffee. Never miss. I never miss. In the days that I do, she reminds me. But it's not just a normal cup of coffee. It's literally a latte. It's brewed, and it takes the frothy milk, and it takes just the right amount of creamer. And then when it's all put together, I put it back into the microwave for another 30 seconds. Then the froth rises up to the top of the glass, and I put a stir stick, and I literally serve her that cup of coffee before she gets out of bed. And I say, good morning, my love. And I would tell you this. Why is that so important? Because I want you to understand we need to start our day in service.
You know, Todd, sorry to interrupt you here, but we've had another guest on previously that is how he starts his day as well. And that is just the service of doing something for someone that he loves. Right. And it's interesting that you do that as well.
His phrase is building wins, and that's a win to serve somebody else. So it's amazing how that reflects back and makes us feel good. And
plus our coffee tastes so much better when it's made by somebody else.
Yeah. And last but not least, thank you, Heather. I make the bed. I always make the bed. That's awesome. My morning routine.
Awesome.
Do you want to go into some rapid fire?
Yeah, go ask the next one. We got to ask the next one. All
right. We got it. Yeah, we have to ask you this one. So as our listeners, our watchers can see, you are a very fashionable guy. We've always admired that about you, one of the many things. But if there is any fashion trend that you could kill, what would it be? Come on. You've got it. Overrated.
Hair is way overrated
and expensive.
I just love fashion. The first thing that came in my head was bell bottoms, but then I see that these are starting to come back, but I kind of like them because when we were kids, we had bell bottoms. I don't know. I think some people would say skinny jeans, but I wear them. So I don't know. I don't like tennis shoes with dress pants.
I would agree with you there. So I feel like it's too casual. All right. I'm going to ask you one more, and these are just rapid fire questions. We usually ask guests to get them warmed up and fired up, but in your case, you already are fired up. But what are the 3 least likely words someone would say about you?
Boring, sleepy, uncommitted.
Wow, those were quick. And I would agree.
I would agree. You're spot on. That's awesome. And with that, we're going to transition now back into the piece that you were sent to. Talk a little bit about your childhood, and maybe I understand your dad was a coach, a football coach, but he also did some other things. And I would like to hear for listeners, because we like to hear stories about how people had to overcome things and change their mindset, because you don't have 14 companies and go fly around the country speaking and doing the engagements and things you do without thinking differently than the day you walked out of that or off that football field for the last time in college. In fact, there was, if I recall correctly, there was some heartbreak in that. Can you take us a little bit about through the transition? I know it's going to be too hard to go tell all the stories, and they can find your material in your books, but I'd like to give the listeners or the audience a little bit of an idea what you had to do in your mind to shift that to where you are today.
Well, I think that, the bottom for everybody is a motivator, right? And I think there's been two, to be honest with you, there's been two bottoms. The first bottom was after I had gotten married and, we lost everything in my first entrepreneurial business. And I just never let that ruin me, right? And I was not in this power mindset I am now. I think it was a natural mindset that I had inherited through my athletics. I had two babies, and basically I just looked at it as, okay, I'm going to live in a trailer for a while. Right. And then what happened in that mindset was that I embraced the trailer lifestyle. I embraced this idea. I owned living in a trailer. Right. I bragged about it. I bragged to my 2-year-old and my 3-year-old when they wanted to listen. This is going to be great for you, man. We're going to, and then I would just paint the vision of where we were going to be on that property one day. And I really did go through the 5 Ds. Really, I dreamed it. I demanded it. I designed it. And then I drew it. And then ultimately, I deposited it in my subconscious. Now, I was doing those 5 Ds that I teach on before I knew I was doing them. And that's why I'm able to draw on those things. The second time in my life was, we made a lot of money. I made a lot of money, and I pulled myself up for the second time. We'd lost everything for the second time, but we were back. And I think our marriage was really, really challenged. It was really, really challenged. And I could have quit. Could have quit everything. I think God really stepped in at that point. And he supercharged that mindset, and he redirected me to what I was fighting for. It wasn't just the business now, or it wasn't just money anymore. It was for my commitment to my family, my children, and this mindset that had taken over me that wasn't me. And I think whether it's a marriage, whether it's a business, whether it's a time, I think that we're all going to be confronted with that component of that challenge where we just drift. And then we drift again, right? We sin, and then we sin again. We lose focus, and then we lose focus again. And I think it's a massive trait of successful people that they do drift. But the most successful people in the world, like Gary, like you, Heather, and I would say like myself, is that we can control that drift. We can stop that drift. We can catch it before it gets too far. And that was the precursor of my second book, Drift Again.
We want to thank Century Insurance for being a sponsor on the Mindset Growth Podcast. They work in about 18 different states, bringing insurance needs to small businesses, construction, and others likewise. They will tailor packages that fit your needs. They can work with bonds, home and auto insurance, life insurance and benefits, as well as health insurance. They will help you through the process of putting together a tailored package that benefits you and serves your family and your clients to its most effective capacity. We appreciate their support. We want to thank Gary Bontrager Consulting for being a sponsor on the Mindset Growth Podcast. There's a variety of services they offer. They have human resources for one. They have a sales program. They also work with the financials, whether you need to help set up your QuickBooks or go with a high-level person that can help you do benchmarking, budgeting, and the likewise. They also do a lot of leadership training, whether you're the business owner, manager, or are just leaders in departments. They can tailor those packages for you. Reach out to them for a free consult, and they will see what your needs are and offer different opportunities for you to put in motion to take your business to the next level. They have been successful over the past few years in helping organizations not only grow, but grow as much as 200%, 300%, and 400% in a 12-month period. Certainly, they understand it takes a strong foundation, and there are years where there may be no growth leading up to this as they put the right pieces in place. Reach out to them at www.garybontrager.com. You can reach out to them on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter and get the free advice that they offer, and that may be just what you need to set you on a different path to lead you forward and be successful in your business and your life. We appreciate them supporting us. So with that, though, because I know you're passionate about relationships, you're an extremely relational individual. You probably went through those 5 Ds again in that scenario to figure out how you're going to rebuild and come back out of that. And when you came out of that, I guess your mind had to be, I mean, at that point, clearly I use your term wired differently, but you had to think completely different than you had with what got you into that position. Is that correct?
Yeah, I had to rewire. You know, I had to really go after this whole process of redepositing thoughts. Listen, I did bring this to you, and I want you to understand that your mind is like a motor, right? And each side of a motor has magnets, right? And around the shaft of a motor is copper wires. And the more wires that are wrapped around that shaft, Gary, right, the more torque the motor has. And so if you can look at your brain and you can realize that you're wiring the things you watch, the things you say, the things you think, the more you do that, the more wires being wrapped around that motor, the more torque that motor is going to have, and it's going to have it in the wrong places. And so, you know, you have to look at that motor and you have to say, okay, this wiring that I'm wrapping needs to be rewrapped with different wires. Because every lap creates what's called an ant. You ever heard of that? An ant?
Yes.
No.
An automatic negative thought, Heather.
Yes.
An automatic negative thought.
Okay.
Right? And they worm their way into you. And then they come up and they tell you, maybe you're not happy with your marriage. Maybe you'd be happy doing this. Maybe you're too big for this. Maybe you're too good for this. Maybe you're not good enough. Maybe you're bald. You're not attractive. You're whatever it is, whatever that is, those things are coming from the manifestations of those negative thoughts from the time you're a child to where you are now. And you have to stop those thoughts.
Yeah. Those are the automatic. Yeah.
Yeah, they're automatic thoughts, automatic negative thoughts. And so we want to rewrap that mindset, right? And I simply just say the Lord's Prayer. When I start to get down and that thought starts to come in my head, I'm right at it. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. And there's times where I've done 50 Our Fathers in one night. Your mind can only do one thing at one time, Gary.
That's interesting. And I'm happy to hear that you share that, because one thing that's worked for me growing up, when I had those negative thoughts, my thing is I start just verbally, if I can out loud, if I'm alone, and if I'm with some people or in a group, I'll just do it in my head. But I start to just list my greatest blessings in life, and I'll just go until pretty soon I'm not even thinking about those anymore. I'm just at a different place. And it's just, there's formulas no different than when we're playing sports, exercising, and doing workouts to be better, the mind is more important than our physical body will ever be. And that is the tool I use. It's, I mean, clearly similar to yours, but I want listeners to understand that, Heather, that they can actually control those things. They weren't dealt a bad deck, and they don't have to live with a bad deck, because usually when we have those, that's when that's just a challenge to become better and to learn and to grow. I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's important for folks, because if there's a question I get when I work with people, they ask me so often, how do I change my negative mindset? How do I change my depression? There's more of that going on in this world right now than I wish. I mean, I just don't like to see the negativity and some of those things that we deal with in society. So I appreciate you sharing that. But
I mean, it's not the answer to everything. I'm not trying to make it easy. Some people have conditions that are different than others. But what I really want to impress on you, and you're saying the same thing, is I want people to understand the science of the mind, the science of the brain. I mean, God has created us in his own image, but yet there is a science. Right? It's not magic. It's not witchcraft, not all of this. I mean, he literally laid this path out for us. Our subconscious gets what it wants, but our subconscious has no conscience. Without Christ in our life, we don't have a filter in our subconscious. So the things that you're letting you drive, I joke about it in my keynote speech that one day I've been watching this commercial on my Pillow Guide, and after 1 million commercials, I woke up the next morning. I had 20 pillows, I had slippers, I had towels, I had blankets, I had sheets. I mean, I'm like, the truck came in from my pillow in Mike Nadell, and I'm like, oh my goodness, he took my mind. You see, if we're not controlling our mind, someone else is, and it might be Mike Nadell, which isn't quite so bad, but can you think about the other opportunities to control your mind? It's a very great conversation to have.
Right. I agree with that. You've got kids, and I do as well. And I know, Heather, you do too. And they're all maybe in different stages in life, but it's interesting how kids process those things. And I agree with you. It's
interesting what they pick up on as well.
So let me just give you the real, I want you to challenge your followers, Gary and Heather. I want you to really challenge your followers. And I want you to say these words, and these no uncertain terms, if you haven't already, is we need to be purposeful. We need to be supremely purposeful about really understanding how to populate and program our own subconscious. That deposit piece that I was just kind of having fun with you with, and I drew my first house, I drew my car, I've never done a formal business mapping, but I draw. And I think you need to really, listen, you never had to plant a seed to grow a weed, right? You really need to plant the seed. And you can't be too hokey about it. You can't say, well, you're going to listen to this crazy stuff Gary and Todd's talking about and mind stuff and all that. Well, you just tell those people no. If they think you're goofy, just tell them no. You haven't had problem telling your mom and dad no. You haven't had problem telling your teachers no, your preachers no. You haven't had problem telling the president of the United States no. Matter of fact, you didn't have problem telling God no. Why is it so hard to tell somebody to just stop, shut up, get out of my life? I'm going to listen to Gary and Heather for once, right? It's not that hard, because you guys are spot on.
Well, thank you, Todd.
That's how I feel about
That's
it.
Solid. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
You are right, though, when it comes to, people that are there to diminish what you are trying to achieve. It's so easy to focus on what they're saying rather than the ones that are like yourself, Todd. Listen, I love what you're doing. Keep after it. So
it's all good.
I have got, I'm looking at the questions we sent you, and I know we're way off topic. So at this point,
you fire away, man.
At this point, I enjoy so much what you're sharing, because I was going to go through, but there's really no way to go through.
Well, let's do 2 parts. Let's do a follow-up show.
We'll do that. But here's the thing, I guess I want folks to think about one story that resonated with me. And this is where it goes back to, because you got another book coming out, and we can maybe do a follow-up on that when you come out with that one. But I know you had a story where your life was crushed somewhat based off of what an injury, and I believe it was an injury that happened on the football field because it kind of damaged what you thought maybe was a career path. And the reason I'd like for you to talk about that, if you're willing to, is I think so often people think they're dealt a hand and circumstances. And I know you gave us 2 examples already, but you had to completely shift where you were going to go, because had you had a professional football career, certain business opportunities and things that you'd accomplish were going to come at you very differently and probably a lot easier, because folks were going to get behind you in a different way than they did with how things went down. And that's just my perspective. I don't know if that's accurate. But
no, it's very accurate, but I think it's a lot simpler than that. So I was a small college football All-American athlete. I'm in the Hall of Fame at Manchester University. Matter of fact, I just most recently named the field and the press area after me, which is a really big honor. Yeah.
Congratulations.
And, thank you. So listen, I'll just give you this. So the last game I played in, I crushed my back, and I finished the game, but I ended up having to have surgery. And clearly I had to try out with the Bears, the Lions, and the Vikings. I look back at that and I think, well, would I made it? You just never know. Maybe I was a little slow, but I could catch the ball, right? But the bottom line is I remember talking to my dad about it. And he felt bad about my back, and he knew that the disc and the situation that has hampering me even to this day was not overcomable. And I said, Dad, now what? And he just looked at me and he says, listen, son, you're not going to make a living digging ditches now, right? You're not going to be able to make a living really working digging ditches, metaphorically, right? Like, because it takes a back to deliver ditches. And I said, Dad, what do you mean? He says, you're going to have to really use your mind. Mm-hmm. And that's the story I got from that. And so it changed the way I looked at things. It started me as a young age, at the age of probably 22, 23, to start thinking about life and work from an entrepreneurial mindset in systems. Everything I do is in systems. Every organization I own right now is a reoccurring revenue money-making machine. It's all running right now, and I'm not doing anything. Had I been down the football path, it would have all been based on my performance.
Right.
Think about that for a moment. Mm-hmm. Where would you rather be?
And that was my point. And that's what I want. That's what I want to hear from you.
Right. Right. And so I would tell you that's the lesson I would share with people.
Okay.
And that's what I coach with people in my entrepreneurial mindset wired differently. I help teach people how to build systems in their entrepreneurial mindset. I help teach them how to build organizations. Matter of fact, almost any organization that's up and running, that's been in business for at least 3 years or more, I will find them $100,000 in the first 45 minutes I spend with them. I just know I can do it. And then I can help turn that into a system. So if they want, they can move into other entrepreneurial mindsets and have other organizations and have that multiple stream of income. And so that's what the Wire Differently Coaching, ToddSaylor.com. So if you want to go to ToddSaylor.com, click coaching, you'll see a website there. You'll see the coaching paths. And if anybody's inclined to it, I'd love to have you on my Successionaire private group, Todd Saylor, Wired Differently. Go there on Facebook, click that, and we'll invite you to that Successionaire group. I do it every morning, Monday through Friday, sometime between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. I go live for about anywhere from 8 to Monday I went 30 minutes, but not normally, Heather.
Okay. So along that topic line then, when you are working with young entrepreneurs, new business owners, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you focus on with them or have them focus on?
Yeah. So the first part of my coaching is always mindset. I feel like traditional coaches, even the coaches I've worked with, and Gary, some of us that we've shared in the past, they're more like counseling sessions where you get a phone call and then you tell them what's going wrong in your company, and then they find a way to talk about, I don't know, personality traits, or they find a way to talk about something other than the profit loss component, right? And I really think it's important that before we can really get them to those type of thoughts, we've got to carve it all the way back. We've got to go back to their mindset. Nobody taught them mindset. There's no college that I've ever went to that has a 101 mindset. They don't teach you how to balance checkbooks, and they don't teach you mindset. So we go all the way back and we say, okay, listen, right? You can only rise to the level of your greatest weakness, right? People fail the goals, but rise to systems, right? And those are core processes that we need to talk about. And once we learn the 3 stages, right? We've got the creation, we got the actualization, and then we talk about salvation. My Wired Differently coaching is a Christ-centered movement. Mindset, mission, movement, and ministry.
You know, Todd, that's so interesting as well, because one thing I have recognized, and we go in now, we have actually a questionnaire we have everybody fill out when we come in to work with a client. And I have totally missed the mark in the past, but today, number one, we take a look at financials. And I have had people hire me that tell me, we cannot afford you. And I will tell them, you give me a month, you can't afford to not do business with me. And the difference is we're just looking at the processes and just changing a lot of the very basic things. I've had companies that have been in business 10, 12, 13 years, and they do not know what a net profit is.
They don't even have a budget.
No. And it's incredible. So what I have learned is I don't want to go in and have them spend a lot of money with me to only fail that much bigger. I want to come in and totally change it and see that by the time year 2 and 3 are rolling around, they're having 2, 3, and 400% growth in their company. They've got more free time. Their family's doing better. They're happier. They're healthier. Those are the things. There's other aspects that go into it, but I think it comes back to, because we both see a lot of coaches in our travels, and I think it comes back to a couple of things. One, probably some of our own experiences where we've just been essentially kicked in the teeth by our
taken
own
advantage of,
but by our own misdoing.
let down.
But we were a high level of trust. We're going to let this, and then it just wasn't what we thought. Today, you make calculated decisions. It's a whole different process, but the mind is a big piece of it, and you've got to change it right here. And that's what makes 100% of all that difference. Love to hear what you're doing about that with clients, because we can talk, you're right, we can talk personalities. We can talk about a lot of things. I also see coaches will come in and they get asked questions and they're like, well, I would buy this. I would start to market here. Well, you're not teaching that individual how to make those decisions on themselves, by themselves. You're basically running another business now, and you just became CEO. And I do not like to see that either, because you and I have enough businesses and other obligations. We don't need to start running other folks, their business yet as well. So leadership, I guess I'd like your take a little bit on leadership. I sum it up a lot of times that it doesn't matter. And I talk about this when I speak a lot, because I'll come into companies and speak where there's a lot of, it might be a 16-year-old kid that comes in after school and he's just sweeping the floor. And I'll just look at him and I go, are you a leader? Well, no, I'm not. I come in every day. And I'm like, you can be a leader. The only difference is, in my opinion, is how you influence others. Show up on time, be courteous, be energetic, treat people right. Do something to improve somebody else's day and influence their thought process. If everybody's dogging the boss or the manager, stop that. You can change by influence, because I believe that's what leadership is. It's not a position. I'm sure you deal with that as well. What are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, I think leadership is a condition, not a position, right? I think success is a condition, not a position. I think those two are not mutually exclusive. I think those two are intertwined. And so when you think about a condition versus a position, condition is a state of a mind, right? It's a state of being. It's a state of you're in this condition everywhere you go. And so immediately when you talk about a young person or any person, if they have any free time, pick up a broom, pick up a damn broom. I don't care. Don't stand around. Pick up a broom. Metaphorically, pick up a broom, right? Leaders pick up a broom. They pick up a sword, right? That is initiative. That is leadership in a nutshell, right? Leadership is not a position. It's a condition.
So with that,
I love the way you said that.
So with that, if leadership is a condition, not a position, and I support that completely, you have 14 different entities or companies that you own and operate and manage, and you talk about systems. But would you be willing to share maybe a bit about how that process goes to train the right people and attract the right people? I think that's another thing that happens when we get into small business. Folks feel like, well, I've got my cousin doing this and I cannot, demote him to bring in somebody I need. But I also see a lot of times where there was no expectations, a job description, or any training that's ever happened in that position. So what are some of the things? I mean, we've got a process we go through, but I'm just curious to know how you handle that, or if you recognize that as well.
Well, I think I recognize it, but I don't have anything wrote down on that regard. But I would tell you is that most of these solopreneurs that we're working with, or these small organizations that are growing their organizations, they need to be purposeful up front with their cousin or with that hire. Is that you're built, that you being the owner or the leader of that organization are going to be building an organization that works for me, right? So the first thing I would tell somebody is that if you own a company and you're working in the company, you don't own a company, you own a job.
Thank you.
Right. So I want you to understand, do you want to own a company or do you want to own a job? Do you want to own a job that you go to work with every day and you put all that money in your bottom line in your pocket and you go buy a HBO and you go buy a truck and you go buy a bicycle and a motorcycle and if that's what you want to do is own a job, then just tell me, because I'm not the right coach for you. But if you want to own a business that you're going to build that works for you, then I'm the right guy, right? And I want you to understand that if that's who you want to be, then you need to make it clear to everybody that walks through that door and have them join you in that systems mentality, because they may not want to be the person that works for you all the time. And if they are, they're that C type of personality or that S or that person that just wants a job, then you know where to put them. But if they're that person that says, hey, man, I like that idea, then come on board, because you're going to be part of this growth. You're going to be part of this system. You're going to be working so that you're not having to work every day washing these windows. And you're not going to, that's your first person that you can elevate with that mindset with you. And now you have that caveat. You have that budding. I did a whole message on partnerships. There's different types of partnerships, but the best partners are the ones that you build. Right.
Right.
The best partners aren't the ones that slop $1 million into your organization. They become entitled and they become a problem, and they think they got to make decisions that you don't want them to make decisions in. Right. I mean, it's so much easier if you look at that person and you bring them into your organization. I have 3 partners. I never had any partners in my life other than my wife. And now I have 3 partners, and all of them, every one of them, I've given them equity in my organizations.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Because they've worked their way up through it.
Sure.
Right.
And now think about ownership, right? Think about commitment. It was just given to them, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the best kind of partner. That's the mindset I think you should set up with your systems.
That's interesting that you share that. I have had partners unsuccessfully in the past with similar experiences as you explain. And I have an organization that I have 2 partners the same way you're talking about. The mindsets are so different. It's right. Our focus is just so on spot together with where we're headed and what we're accomplishing. So
awesome, Gary.
Those are just valuable tips. Listeners, take note of this. Todd's just not even scratching the surface on his wisdom. I can tell you that. We're running up to the end here. And I know you kind of gave us a little bit of where people can find you and all of that already. You shot that commercial about right in the middle, so that was good. We were going to get there sooner or later. If you were going to give a young business owner 2 to 3 tips that are going to be invaluable for them to find success, and I will come back to this. I talk a lot about Matthew 25, verse 15 through 31. It's just the parable of the talents. And so I like listeners to think about this. There are times we get tired, and it's back to when you said earlier about wired differently, and sometimes we just kind of drift. Well, the fact is we've been wired with incredible ability. And I can promise you at the end of my life, I'm not coming sliding in there with a new wax job and shiny wheels. I'm coming in there a little ragtagged, but I feel a high responsibility to serve people and give back and teach others everything that I've learned, whether it was the easy way, the hard way, whatever it was, make a difference in other people's lives. So if you're going to give 2 to 3 things that would help them start down that path and maximize their talents in their life and find their full potential, what would those be?
So I'll do this quickly. First of all, 2 Timothy 4:7. I fought a good fight. I finished the race. We're both coming in hard and tattered, but we're coming in to receive the righteousness of the crowns that are set before us. I love that. I felt like I had to really share that with you. But my keynote, I talk about will, right? And so I just will give you these 4 pieces of will. So number 1, W in the word will is want. Know what you want. You must know what you want. You'd be surprised at how many people in this world just don't even know what they want. Right? So I would give you that. Letter W is for want. I is for identity. I want you to understand the North Star of all your habits is your identity. Who do you want to be? What do you want to look like? What do you want to represent to the world? Now, I want you to understand if your identity crosses with your wants, you're on the right path. And last 2 I want to give you is L. I want you to load. I want you to load that subconscious. I want you to load that subconscious with your want and your identity. And last but not least, I want that last L to be the lift. I want you to lift. I want you to go through the reps of those habits, that coffee in the morning, that making the bed, that prayer, that devotional. If you can line all 4 of those letters up, W-I-L-L, want, identity, load, and lift, you're going to be moving right where you want to go. And I promise you that will work for you, Gary and Heather, and all the listeners out there.
I appreciate that so much, Todd. Heather, any questions or final thoughts?
Well, final thought with that W. I think me personally, I have played in that arena for a very long time. What is it that I want? What do I want to do? So
it's hard
you're
sometimes,
spot
isn't it?
on. Yeah, definitely. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you can't get what you don't know you want.
Right.
And God created us to want things, right? And we just got to make sure they're the right things.
Right.
You know, we talk a lot about vision boards. When I visit with clients, especially in their personal life, just to help start that process. And so I want listeners to think about that, as Todd has shared, how you've got to draw out pictures, because once a lot of us are very visual people, and once we can see those pictures, we can burn them into our mind. And that's what we've got to see in our mind every day when we think of that one common goal. And yes, we probably need it on paper to come back to just reset ourselves. But I appreciate that so much. Todd, I want to thank you so much for your time today. We are definitely going to have to do round 2 of this. That's when we're going to dive into your book.
In Florida next time.
Yes, we'll do it in Florida.
Come on now.
We'll be down there here in a few months. So
you come see me.
We'll have
go
to
check me out at toddsaylor.com.
There you go.
toddsaylor.com. That's SAYLOR, toddsaylor.com.
And I will give this final plug. Todd has high energy, high value, and he has high ethics and morals. And he is somebody that I can support because I see his passion, not only follow his words, but his actions follow those as well. And with that, Todd, I want to thank you for being on the Mindset Growth Podcast, and you have a great day.